Good morning. It's still morning. And this is our first day of Sesshin. So maybe you're a little sleepy from early wake up. But I'm hoping you can stay awake as I speak today. You know what it's like when you're talking and everybody's... What can I say? And I also think what I have to say is important. How we integrate our Zen practice with what's happening around us in our country, its impact on the world. We sit here together and we hear the birds sing. And we're surrounded by this reassuring, kind of healthful feeling greenness that's all around us. And we are taking in the healing that zazen offers us. How fortunate we are. We have a chance to notice our bodies, to notice how reluctant our minds are to give in, to simply experience each moment. And after some time, we begin to let go for a moment or two and experience just this. Then we say, oh, amazing! I was feeling so balanced and present. And congratulate ourselves a little bit. And we move back into a different space, a space of yes and no, good and bad. Have and have not. We leave this boundless space and are back in our everyday mind. But there's nothing wrong with that everyday mind. Actually, that's bodhisattva space. Bodhisattva space notices difference and takes appropriate action. We have an archetype of the bodhisattva who cares and offers care for others. This year I set up in my cabin my personal altar, and I selected a picture, a postcard actually, of a bodhisattva with 1,000 arms, and they're one after another, so it gives the illusion when you look at it that they're moving, all of these arms. And it's, to me, it speaks of compassionate activity in the world. The image is from the Chinese 5th dynasty period. Almost the whole of the 10th century was just a disaster in China. They had one dynasty and then it broke into 5. And it wasn't so dissimilar to what's going on in the world today. Disorder, the upsetting of power, the upsetting of forms of civility and ways of governing. There were persecutions and power struggles, wars. It's much like today in our own country. We don't have the wars yet, but we certainly have lost nuance. So in both periods, then and now, there was a need for bodhisattvas. With thousands and thousands and thousands of arms and hands. All kinds of tools and techniques, skills that are possible to assuage the suffering and to reestablish a reasonable and stable state. And Dogen also lived in a very difficult time. The time he wrote the text we're studying, this Ango, the Genjo Koan, there had been really, a few years before, 2 years before, there had been really weird weather. It had snowed in the summer. If you've ever been to Japan in the summer, you know, it's so hot, sweaty. It snowed in Japan. And the crops were ruined, and there was a famine that was ensued. They say that corpses were laying on the streets of Kyoto. People had starved to death. Plus, in the political realm, there was this huge adjustment, you know, from having an emperor and his court and samurais taking over. It's said that Dogen left the first monastery he was in because there were thefts were so bad in the monasteries, the monks stealing from one another, and there were monastic armies fighting one another. So when you read Dogen, so get it. It was a hard time, very hard time. And he wrote this for a lay student, someone who had spent a retreat period with him, a Dharma student, and was on his way back to Kyushu province, which is at the kind of southernmost archipelago of the Japan Islands, very close to the Korean Peninsula. And that particular province was also in harm's way, and there were great fears of an invasion from China or Korea. So it was a grievous time. And I think, you know, I could just talk about zazen today, but I think in this country we are perilously close to tyranny. Admittedly, a very imperfect democracy here. Always has been, very imperfect. So you have slavery, greed, anger, and ignorance have always been undercurrents of this country. But now there is an outrageous, overt oppressing of the poor, serving the rich, oppressing the immigrants. I just want to know what's up with you. What are you doing about it? You know, I just find it outrageous to be observing what's happening in this country. The administrative offices, the State Department, the Department of Education, the Environmental Protection Agency. Are you paying attention to what's happening? Federal court judgeships being appointed. Not to mention what happened in the appointment of the Supreme Court that was denied Obama. If you were writing a plan to convert the United States to an oligarchy, you would be right on schedule. So, but I don't want to be a shouting ideologue. I want to be a bodhisattva. How do I do that? I read Genjo Koan. How mysterious is that? You know, Genjo Koan has been translated, the title alone has been translated in so many different ways. And the one that we're using, Kaz Tanahashi's version, which is the most common version for American Soto school in this country. And he translates it as actualizing the fundamental point. To actualize, to make real, to concretize the truth, the Buddha Dharma, to concretize God, however you want to translate it. That's what it's about. How to make it real and not an abstraction. Not a classic writing on Buddhism, on Zen Buddhism, but having to do with your life. So that's why my teacher, Maizumi Roshi, called it the koan of everyday life. That was his title. Another, Heiji Kim, who writes a lot about Dogen, a wonderful Korean scholar, called it the realization koan. The puzzle of how we realize. So, all of these kind of get at this idea of expressing how we can express our individual self in relation to the whole. I mean, we could say form and emptiness, but then I'll put you to sleep, so I want to try to keep it more personal and intimate and not use those terms. How do we meet the whole, wholeheartedly? This whole that I'm painting for you. I mean, there are other wholes to talk about, but this whole that I'm painting for you. So that's why I've translated, and you've heard me say this before, I was talking, I think, last week about it. I think the title that I like best is Showing Up. That's how I would translate Genjo Koan. Showing up. How do we show up in our multi-dimensional lives? We have our personal relations, our intimate relationships, our work relationships, sangha, our own internal struggles to understand ourselves and our lives, and our role as citizens in the world, and in this country, and in the state we live in, the city we live in, the neighborhood we live in. How do we show up for all the things that are going up nowadays? So let me explain how I think Genjo Koan helps us to do that. Helps us to balance our lives. It begins, as all things are Buddha Dharma, there are delusion, realization, practice, birth and death, Buddhas and sentient beings. As myriad things are without an abiding self, there is no delusion, no realization, no Buddha, no sentient beings, no birth, and no death. The Buddha way, in essence, is leaping clear of abundance and lack. Thus there are birth and death, delusion and realization, sentient beings, and Buddhas. Yet, in attachment, blossoms fall, and in aversion, weeds spread. So, how could those first 4 lines of the Genjo Koan help us in these troubling times? Dogen starts off, as all things are Buddha Dharma, there are delusion, realization, practice, birth and death, Buddhas and ancient beings. What I'm hearing there is a very ordinary view of reality. It's also an ordinary view of awakened truth, the Buddha Dharma. As all things are Buddha Dharma, so indicates that everything is the awakened teachings, the Buddha Dharma, the awakened truth. We can't deny that there's delusion around and there is awakening. Then how many times a day you experience delusion. And then all of a sudden you wake up and realize, oh, that's not the way it is. That's the power of our practice. We realize it. And we stop and we wake up over and over again. It's not that we go around living an awakened life, but we have the power to wake up. And we're living in a time when we can recognize that the three classic Buddhist poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance are proliferating in our society. So this is the truth. This is the Buddha Dharma right now. There's a falling down and a getting up. There are Buddhas and sentient beings. Each of us, all day long, inhabit that space, and so does the world around us. To realize that all things are Buddha Dharma, and to say, yes, this is the way things are, and as humans, we are living in this reality now. In order to serve the world, we have to meet the world. And we have to accept that that's the way things are right now. Things are in troubling space. That radical acceptance of now is not saying it's okay. It's saying, this is what's happening now. I am not deluded. I am not hiding with my head in the ground. So immediately when we can accept that first line of the Genjo Koan, Doug reverses it for us, stops us. He reminds us that the way we have of structuring reality, the way we put tags on things, you are separate from me, you are bad and I am good, or I am bad and you are good. All of those are illusory ways of thinking. As myriad things are without an abiding self, there is no delusion, no realization, no Buddha, no sentient being, no birth, and no death. Can you take that in? You know, it's rather like the Heart Sutra we chanted this morning. No eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. Huh? Just right now, close your eyes. Imagine empty. Just allow your breath to go in and out. No edges to your being. No self that's persisting all day, but rather just this moment. And you feel the release, the succor, the power of emptiness offers you. All that we think and all that we hold dear, our own selves, our own stories, is all on one level merely a way of structuring reality. A way of organizing the impulses to your senses. It's just a way. It isn't truth. Dropping it. There's no me and there's no you. There's no Trump or cruelty or kindness. There's just this. So that this reality also exists in our lives. It's also an aspect of our reality. Gives us a glimpse of a deeper truth. A resonant reality that lives deeper than the toing and froing of our ordinary lives. A silence that has no name. The soft breeze from the fan there. Bird chirping outside. No name, no label. Flow. No walls or borders. But wait, there's a third line. He has presented us with the Buddha Dharma and the problems and troubles of our times, and then he says, none of it. Then, he says, the Buddha way. The first was the Buddha Dharma. The second was myriad things, or emptiness, or vastness, or silence, or presence. The third is the Buddha way. That's the way we live an awakened reality. Is, in essence, leaping clear of abundance and lack. Thus their birth and death, delusion and realization, sentient beings and Buddhas. This is the heart of the teaching. This is the Buddha way. The way of awakening. It leaps clear, he says, or jumps over. I love that translation that Kaz chose. Leaps clear of abundance and lack. It jumps over. It's not stopped by. It's not frozen by either our sense of the reality of everyday life or our sense of oneness or emptiness. Neither of these aspects of reality, neither of these truths of Buddhism are stopping our experience of the moment in this third line, are stopping our experience of the awakened way, the Buddha way. So the Buddha way leaps clear of both of these very true and profound realities. We don't get caught up in the everydayness and truth of our life, nor do we get caught up in that kind of empty, vast, undifferentiated reality. This is to wake up. This is to show up. How do we show up? I want so much to make a difference, to make an effort to ensure that food and medical care is available, housing, basic human rights in this country. And I also realize that in the midst of my own small efforts, there's also a reality present at each moment that disentangles difference, disentangles you versus me, my opinion of how things should be and your opinion, unknots that difference. And that's what keeps me from becoming like an ideological warrior, right? Or a martyr. it opens our heart to the deepest truth. That we are interconnected with everything that's going on and equally responsible. It's not them and us. It's us and us. To make this more clear, Dogen adds the last line, which I love. Yet in attachment blossoms fall, and in aversion weeds spread. So even in this moment that we recognize the way things really are, and also we recognize that things are not what we see, and even when we live clear of these dichotomies and prepare ourselves to act as bodhisattvas in the world, still we lose what we love, and what we do not like increases. That's so wabi-sabi. In attachment, blossoms fall, and in aversion, weeds spread. Ah, yes. Can you shed a tear when you look at the history of humankind? Or before humans, look at the history of the earth. My God. Look at it. The sad and beautiful mystery of life. Preciousness of each moment. You know, you see blossom fall. And the requirement that we live in these multiple realities, that we live in these two spheres. In doing that, we can live a fully human life, one that serves. So, I hope you can make an effort to show up for all of it. Even that tender reminder that everything is flowing in a stream of impermanence. And no matter how we feel, everything is moving on. To accept it is not to say this is okay. It is to say, this is what I see. This is what is right now. So that we can leap clear of our attachments and work in a wise Buddha way. I'll end with the Gatha. Everything, no thing, all things. A smile, a tear, picking up a blade of grass, opening our hearts. Nothing is left out when we show up, and life is served.